Hello again. So, for the purpose of this video, I will be using the terms phenomena and noumena in the Kantian sense quite frequently, such that phenomena are the subjective experiences of perception, and noumena is the fundamental reality of a thing as it is regardless of any perception around it, or even if it is perceived at all. So, when I use the word phenomenal, I am not referring to something extraordinary or exciting. I am referring to whatever it is as it is perceived, and not necessarily in its objective existence, unless of course the phenomena has merged with the noumena, which is to say the perception of the thing is accurate. Furthermore, I would like to distinguish between two types of noumena, which I will refer to as the functional noumena and the transcendental noumena, which I will define as such. The functional noumena is a defined measure of the accurate properties of an object, whereas the transcendental noumena is the complete totality of the properties of an object to a degree of absurdity which is essentially impossible to calculate. I've never personally heard anybody make this distinction before, but I feel that this distinction is quite pivotal in the context of the observation of the general noumena of reality, or the effort to perceive and understand anything that is true, because I've noticed many times that there are a great deal of what I like to term frivolosophirs who, if you approach the very concept of universal truth, they will attempt to discount that it is reachable by essentially proposing that the transcendental noumena is incalculable, and therefore we can only observe phenomena and not noumena. It is somewhat logical to argue that many transcendental noumena are nigh incalculable, but it is not logical to conclude that because of that we cannot attain functional noumena, or to assume that all things are inherently phenomenal. Right, like I can say I'm sitting in a bench right now. By all definitions of bench, it is a bench. I don't have to understand like the disambiguation of the evolution of the word bench, or the fact that people might disagree with my definition of the word bench, etc., etc., to prove that we can't have a mutual definition of language, of words within language. Off script for a second there. Let's see. Give me a second. So yeah, if you've ever analyzed the process by which we as humans can approach universal noumena from our phenomenal limitations, you have likely encountered some sort of argument along those lines, that everything must inherently be phenomenal, everything must inherently be based on perception, so we should just not bother to find the universal truth. And this is somewhat popular for two primary reasons. First, these people like to feel like they have attained a transcendental noumena, which is that it is impossible to find transcendental noumena, which fills them with this sort of pride, thinking that they have a deep philosophical truth. Further, and perhaps more significantly, this line of reasoning leads people to justify apathy in the pursuit of truth. If they convince themselves that it is impossible to attain objective truth, then they no longer have to bother thinking about the complexity of doing so. In general, that's just a fundamentally absurd line of reasoning. There is clearly an objective reality, and we have the capacity to deconstruct parts of it and understand it. So by distinguishing between functional noumena and transcendental noumena, we can more easily acknowledge that it is possible for us, even with our phenomenal limited perspectives, to have functional noumenal truths within our phenomena. I can declare things like I am wearing glasses, I have two hands and two eyes, I have a voice, my voice can change your mind can change where your feet walk can change the future, and the future can be improved through the expansion of wisdom and knowledge. If we can recognize the functional noumena of those sorts of statements, based on simply having mutual definitions of words, then we can begin to unravel more complex mysteries about creation. Of course, that's all a rather obnoxiously elaborate way to reach the very basic conclusion that we have the capacity to discern true things, but I always feel that it is important to clearly establish that basic foundation of reason before elaborating on why we should and how best we can discern the true properties of reality. So in the context of distinguishing between phenomena and noumena, which is actually the initial process of spiritual awakening in the human organism, I would like to first confront one particularly major flaw in what is commonly asserted as the scientific reasoning of mankind. It is, in my observation, overly common to imply that things should be considered false until proven true. This is fallaciously implying that a noumena is dependent upon phenomenal observation. To put it more simply, things are as they are regardless of perception, and to prove that something is either true or false requires an equal amount of absolute precision. To make a claim of falsehood is a positive claim. And so all phenomena must be observed within a spectrum of possibility until proven fully false or true, which may never occur in many situations, requiring us to refine our sense and logic of probability. For emphasis, our structure of probability must not prematurely reject ideas even far beyond our phenomenal observation. We also, of course, must not be overeager to accept ideas far beyond our phenomenal observation, as that will lead to paranoia and further phenomenal inaccuracies. We must simply accept that many things may be possible, even at an extremely small probability, until we figure out how to prove them one way or the other. Only within that psychological acceptance of potential can one hope to approach the profound noumena of spiritual phenomena, which is, again, the first step of spiritual awakening. Seeing the potential for noumena within phenomena and working to structure a system of logic in yourself by which you can discern which parts of your phenomenal observation are noumenal. Alright, you made it through the annoying part. That was all a test to get to this part, fun part, the important part. From here on, I'm going to further test your ability to discern between phenomena and noumena. I'm going to make a number of claims without meticulous proof, so that you have to dissect the probability with your own intuition. First, I'll ask you to consider the importance of the simple question, why does a particular soul wish to awaken to a more noumenal reality? The why a soul wishes to overcome the phenomenal structure of human observation to participate more actively in the noumenal reality is itself a noumenal truth. It is the true will of the soul, which is malleable but constantly noumenal. It is constantly an objective property of the individual, even as it may change based on perception or illusion, and regardless of whether it is consciously observed. This noumenal property of motivation or intent determines naturally what a soul will do with knowledge or power, and is therefore the primary determining factor of whether a soul should be given knowledge or power. The pursuit of truth itself is obviously not intrinsically virtuous, as many pursue truth for selfish gain or out of idle curiosity. Many pursue truth because they hope and believe that the truth will free them from suffering. And what do you think such a motivation will do if it finds out that suffering is actually a fundamentally necessary component of the growth of all souls, and that the only way to be freed from suffering is to remove that component of their soul and become like a machine? A seemingly happy machine, but a machine that is not capable of growth. Should someone who seeks truth with the selfish hope to be freed from suffering be given that truth? Maybe somebody who seeks truth with the hope to free everyone from suffering may be more prepared for that truth because they have a more altruistic intent. And this is actually a sort of major flaw which has infected many Eastern philosophies, which are quite accurate in their observations of many noumenal properties of consciousness, but then misconstrue and assume that nirvana is a state of non-suffering. This ideal of non-suffering is profoundly divergent from the ideal of perfect virtue or the ideal of perfect truth. Many have accurately categorized that the state of non-suffering is a state of detachment from desire. That is true, but they have almost never discussed that the state of detachment from desire is not the ideal state of divine consciousness, but rather the refinement of a more pure desire, something worth suffering for. And that is a profound misunderstanding which is very common on the earth. The ideal state of divine consciousness and true nirvana is the state in which your soul is purified in virtuous intent, wherein you truly hope for the best possible outcome for all conscious souls, which is not oversimplified as non-suffering, but is a complicated calculation that has almost nothing to do with giving people what they want, because what people want is often impure and destructive to them from a noumenal perspective. In the state of true divinity, your soul feels things. You're going to be delighted in the presence of beauty and wisdom, and your heart will be moved by tragedy. You'll have to suffer when you see suffering that is unjust. And that will be because your soul is refined in the purpose for which you exist, which is to improve creation, which is a purpose for which you are willing to suffer. Right? Christ was not a machine. Christ wept. And he was actually the real deal, in case you haven't realized that yet. It's understandable. It's kind of weird. It took me a while to realize it too, but Christ was the real deal. The Old Testament, on the other hand, is almost exclusively about Lucifer, which kind of complicates everything and is one of the main reasons that people feel weird about God, is because they have a very dramatic misassociation right there, because so I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail about that in this video. If you want to confirm it, I suggest that you learn to talk directly with the living God through the purification of your soul. Anyways, those are a few major false idols in common spiritual philosophies. They're fundamentally false constructs of God and of nirvana, which are assumed from the phenomenal perspective as noumenal because it comforts people to think that they have a noumenal truth when they don't. And that's something that you really have to embrace if you seek noumenal truth, is that the very desire to comfort yourself, to feel like you have something absolute, can easily prevent you from digging deeper to reach absolute truths, or at least consider possibilities. The act of seeking the truth is by nature a little bit uncomfortable. Anyways, circling back a little bit, the purpose for which one pursues a more accurate grasp of the functional noumena of reality is one of the most significant noumena in the context of the functional unraveling of space-time moving forward into the future. God and any wise person must consider the purity of one's motivation over any other factor when considering who can and will use higher truth and power correctly, and to whom what manners of knowledge should be given. Most of the time, we prevent ourselves from receiving knowledge even when it is plainly given to us, because we have an unrefined analysis of probability, or we want the truth to be something else. That is part of why there is so much confusion and ego in many spiritual communities, is that people are confronting a sort of divine test about the purity of their motivation in why they're engaging in that community and seeking truth. And they're struggling to understand that they're being tested in that way, or to change their will. And it's fair, because it's not entirely simple, and we are all naturally a bit imperfect. The test to attain sacred truth must be difficult, lest those who are ignorant or wicked gain too much influence over the structure of creation and cause unnecessary harm and tragedy. And yet I do believe that it is the birthright and destiny of mankind to one day reach ultimate truth, if it is their true will to do so for the correct reasons. Once we fully understand and embrace the process of purifying our motivation and our virtue. Only through the noumenal refinement of wisdom and the nobility of our purest hopes can we be prepared to guard ourselves against deception, against ignorance, and against evil, as we labor to unravel the mysteries of creation for the right reasons. I will furthermore declare that it is the ultimate purpose of all religions and of human consciousness to strive to discern the perfection of virtue, which is the precise line between mercy and retribution, wherein justice or karma is perfected. Of course, in any given situation, there might be acceptable and approximately equal variations on that line, but to strive towards precision in that ideal is the highest and most sacred endeavor of human consciousness, insofar as I am aware at this moment. And with that, I will end this video and leave you at that threshold of contemplation. Thank you for listening. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments.